It's Easter as usual for us, isn't it? We come in on Sunday, we drive into downtown, we see the people, we see the building, we take the same route most likely, and it feels like the normal Easter. Or does it feel different because we haven't had an Easter breakfast? Thank you, Michelle, for leading that, right? All right. For me, it was different. Walking in here, I've never had Easter breakfast with Centenary. To see all the tables set up and to start Easter Sunday with a meal together, I couldn't be any happier, especially as someone who is considered a foodie, right? It's been 3 years since we had an Easter breakfast, and to see all of you together, talking story, sharing this time, sharing moments where I haven't seen you in a little bit, I haven't seen you since this and that, and I haven't seen you since then. It's a good feeling. The Spirit was really alive in there this morning. It's normal, but sort of new feeling. Amen? Let's take a moment to pray. Lord, this morning on Easter Sunday, I pray the words from my mouth and the meditations of all of us gathered here on this day be one that is pleasing and glorifying to you. Amen. Well, I tell you, it was normal for Mary Magdalene as well. Visited the loved one, she was buried. She visited the loved one who was buried and was supposed to come back a few days later to check on this loved one. And I think in this particular sense, she really wanted to be there, because if we know the story of Mary Magdalene, and I'm going to save you that because that could be of another day, look her up. She really, really loved Jesus because Jesus did so much for her. So for her to run back was such a big deal to see Jesus after his death. She wanted to be close to him, helping with her grieving process. On her way to the tomb, I'm sure she was running. And you have to realize that for her, she had to do it early in the morning, because in those times, it was the safest for women to run early in the morning because no one else is awake. And it was tough times. It was dangerous times. But she wasn't going to let that stop her from being with Jesus even after his death. And on her way to the tomb, I can only imagine her revisiting, rethinking, going through what happened that past week, this past week. Jesus' entry into Jerusalem would be normally the custom for those preparing for the Passover. This is the most important event in Jewish history. Normally there would be, in that time, Roman soldiers parading into Jerusalem, making sure that everyone in town knows who's in charge. And so they roam around, they parade around, making sure that everyone knows Rome is here, present. And after that, Jesus enters not in a stallion, not on a stallion, but on a donkey. Not very respectful when it comes to showing power and strength. Amen? But you and I know the story. We know how much more powerful his entry into Jerusalem was. And she's still thinking, and she's probably thinking, was that even a good thing for him to come on a donkey? And she's replaying this memory, I'm sure, as she goes and she makes her way to the tomb. And as Jesus enters, Mary would replay in her head the Last Supper. And Jesus had that Last Supper with his disciples. And then how Jesus washed the feet of the disciples, knowing ahead of time that he was going to be betrayed. And that washing of the disciples, usually a servant does that job as they walk into a home. But in this sense, the master takes on the ultimate humility position to wash the feet of his students, knowing, again, the betrayal of Judas, who didn't realize, Judas, who was the treasurer, okay, who didn't realize, and he was a treasurer, which means Jesus trusted him so very much. And as Judas betrays, he didn't realize until it was too late that he actually betrayed the long, long, centuries awaited Messiah. Too much to bear, Judas hung himself. And she's replaying all this. Then Jesus, she plays that moment at the Garden of Gethsemane where he was arrested, and still gave the crowd a chance to set him free, even at the trial. Set him free. The Pilate said, you know what, who would you rather have? Would you rather let go of Jesus, the Messiah, or Barabbas? And the crowd still yelled Barabbas. Why? It's crazy. I can't even tell you why. But they let go of a serial killer on that Good Friday. And because of that, Jesus was flogged and whipped and spat on and humiliated all the way to the cross until Jesus' final breath. And as Mary makes her way to the tomb, she is remembering all of this. I could picture Mary traveling early in the morning, as I say, because she had to travel alone. It has to be safe. But imagine when she got there, the tomb was empty. And she was saying these things, the tomb is empty, and she was terrified, horrified. But it's interesting to me, when you think about that, did she not know? Did she not remember? You know, many of us, we've been a part of a church for so many years, so many Sundays, and yet, I bet you even us, we still are searching for who and where Jesus is today. Amen? It's true. Like Mary Magdalene, we still are looking for that faith. You know, sometimes I pray even, God, you know I have faith, but I want you to be with me, a part of me that's unbelieving as well sometimes. Did she not remember? When Mary ran back afterwards to tell Simon Peter and John that the tomb was empty, she was just, intense. She says, they have taken the Lord away from the tomb. What do we do? Who did this? How many of us, when we think about that, realize that for Mary, she probably felt like she lost everything. Sometimes it probably feels like when some people lost a home or a spouse or a child or a special relationship, maybe even lost your marriage. Sometimes even your dignity because you made a terrible choice. You lose hope. You lose your place to even have the right to be treated like an actual human being. Or even sometimes we lose our memory depending on our illness. And we're experiencing loved ones losing memory all the time. Amen? And it's tough. And I tell you, in life, if there's one thing I don't want to lose, is the ability, the capacity to remember good times that I have with friends and family. What would it be like to not remember good times with friends and family, especially on days like this? Mary saw an empty tomb and felt like she lost her Lord, which probably felt like she lost her whole life at that moment because of what Jesus did for her. But what an odd thing for her to say, that she thought that the Lord was taken away. When she says the word Lord, you have to realize if Jesus is Lord, then Jesus knows what he was doing. There's no way anyone takes away the Lord. If she really believed Jesus was the Lord, she would realize that the Lord doesn't get taken away. The Lord doesn't actually die. So let us realize today, that whatever you've lost, especially in these past 3 years, our faith says we still have Jesus. Can you turn to someone next to you and say, you still have Jesus? But what does it mean to have Jesus on this Resurrection Sunday? I tell you what it means. It means that someone like me, during my college years, my first 2 years, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I sat there and I was sitting there going, I had no purpose in life. And I was sharing this story with the Kid City folks a Saturday ago, last Saturday actually, when they were here for their career day. And Ann Hawthorne gave me and asked me, can you just share a story? And I remember I said, okay, I'll share the story of mine. And I realized as I was thinking about what I wanted to share, I remember that day when I found out from school that I was going to be put on AP. How many know what AP means? Right? Todd knows, right? If you're in high school, you'd say advanced placement, amen? I was brilliant, folks. Advanced placement. I'm just kidding, of course. They don't do advanced placement in college. AP in college is academic probation, folks. I was 0.3 points away from being kicked out of Cal State Northridge, of all places. But I tell you, it was that summer when a pastor said, Key, I have a job for you, and it's teaching fifth graders. And I remember saying, does it pay money? He goes, absolutely. College student, all we're looking for is a little job, right? So I took that job in that church for a summer program, taught fifth graders math, and there was this one kid who was so disruptive in that class, but it reminded me a little bit of me. So I remember that one particular day that the dad couldn't pick up the kid. And so the instructor, the director of the program said, Key, can you take him home? And I said, sure. So I drove that kid home, the fifth grader. And as I drove him home, here he is sharing with me his life. And in 20 minutes, really, it was a 20-minute drive from K-Town to near Hollywood. And I tell you, as I was driving, he was telling me all these stories about his struggles with his stepfather, how he just did not like him. He didn't like the fact how he spoke to him, how he treated him. And he was sharing all this with me. And then at that moment, I realized that I had a purpose. Oh, I didn't expect this. But that's what Jesus brings, is the fact that we have a purpose. And it was at that moment I realized that I wanted to be a teacher. I think because I'm tired a little bit, probably. But as a teacher, in elementary back in the day, there weren't a lot of male colored teachers in K-Town. A lot of the teachers were women, and thank God for many reasons, but there weren't many male teachers. And so I decided, I think God is calling me to be a teacher, to be a present in the elementary school, a person of color walking around, letting them know that not all dads are out there just, doing their best and not coming home because they're working all the time. But here's somebody on campus, and I had a purpose. And that very next semester, I got a 3.8. Amen? In 2 semesters, I got off of AP, not advanced placement, right? Folks, I was given new life. And because of that, God comes with his resurrection at those moments where I feel like sometimes we need God the most. And if it may be not the same kind of story that I experienced, but I tell you, that moment saved my life, saved my purpose, saved what I wanted to do. And I wasn't teaching. God was using that so that I can ultimately become something of a servant here, standing before you as a pastor. Amen? So when we go back to the story, and Mary Magdalene said, where is he? And then Jesus does appear, and she didn't recognize him. So I said, what does that mean? How do you not recognize Jesus when you've been saved by Jesus, when you spent 3 years with Jesus, and it's just been only a week, or actually only 3 days since you've seen Jesus and couldn't recognize him? So the question is, how is that possible? Is it possible because she expected a resurrected Jesus to look a little different? To look like a new Jesus without the wounds in his hands and without the blemishes, without all the tears and without all the whipping marks? The reality is the resurrected Jesus looks like you and me. The resurrected Jesus looks like a community, not one person, but a group of believers moving forward, that when we love, we share Jesus. That when we offer grace, we show Jesus. That when we forgive, we reveal Jesus. That when we hear each other out and we actually listen to one another, we reveal the resurrected Christ. You see, originally, the people of Israel was considered the first son of God, but they struggled being that. So God sent himself to show them what it was supposed to be like. And the new resurrected Jesus is one that says, here, look at my wounds. Look at all of my pains and my scars. This is what the resurrected Jesus looks like.